So tube amps, dude. Tube amps. And I'm not sure, like,
amps.
yeah, tube amps. Like, I'm a massive fan of tube amps. I guess that just to sort of like, it depends on the music for me. Like, if I'm just,
we should record it. We should do it. Let's do it. Fire it up.
Like, record what?
The podcast.
It's recorded.
Oh my God, is it? Oh, that's why it froze. Oh, that's so funny, dude. I thought we were still in the preamble.
No, dude,
welcome to the SBL podcast.
We're diving straight in.
Oh, we're
diving straight in. Yeah.
Okay, cool. Because you started to go, and I'm like, dude, we should be recording this.
Yeah, I'm on fire. But so for me, so check this out. Like every day, sort of like when I'm like because I guess sort of like, you know, people listen to this, they'll be like, well, first of all, what's the difference between a tube amp and a non-tube amp? And am I really going to be able to tell the difference? And all of that, you know, like, so what's the difference? Because there's difference in sound, there's difference in price, and holy shit balls, there's difference in weight. So before we get into sort of like, because I do want to talk about Ampeg's new pedal, because it's wildly interesting. You want to talk about Fender sent you an amp. Leo, Mr. Fender sent you a tube amp. Adam Clayton's signature that sounds absolutely badass, by the way. We've also got some pedals, like the bass rig stuff from Origin. We should mention those as well. Yes. Because I'm really looking forward to somebody doing an A-B between those and the SGT DI.
Oh, that's
the Ampeg
cool.
pedal. Yeah, that's going to be cool. But before we get into any of that, right, the three things, like, what's the difference in sound? What's the difference in price? What's the difference in weight? So first up, what's the difference in sound? Tube versus non-tube.
Well, and we also have to differentiate because we're kind of bleeding categories together here because there's tube preamps, right? Like you mentioned, the SVT tube preamp. Another great one that I love is the Noble tube preamp. It's a DI, like that new, you know, but we also mentioned, then there's this all tube combo amp that Fender made.
There's a tube preamp and tube power amp.
Exactly.
So when somebody says all tube, they mean like tube power amp and tube preamp. Is that correct?
Yes. Okay. Where, you know, you've got tubes. Yeah, you got it. You've got tubes in the preamp that maybe you can distort. Maybe you can get a little bit of saturation out of or a lot of saturation depending on how it's voiced. And then a tube amp, if someone says all tube amp, well, then that means the power section, the wattage too, is generated by these giant glass vacuum power tubes. And they are a different beast. So if we just take a look at the amplifier itself, like the tube power amp, whether it's a combo or whether it's a big head like an SVT, the classic SVT that you plug into an 810 or some kind of cabinet. Let's talk first about the all tube head or amplifier.
All tube. Heavy
preamp, power amp,
as the sun.
Heavy. Oh yeah, because all tube amps, they have these big transformers, the glass tubes. There's something about the design of an all tube amp that just is weighty.
Yeah, and with the sound as well. Like it sounds like what for me anyway. I'm not sure whether it's some sort of like placebo, but it just sort of like
different.
Yeah, it's like it's thick, isn't it? It's got this sort of like thickness to it, kind of soupy, syrupy kind of vibe to it. For me, the attack is different. It kind of
different.
slower than a transformer amp. You know, it kind of just sort of like you know, like Mark bass, they are really fast on the attack. When like the non-tube preamp ones, they're just sort of like regular Mark bass ones that I've got. I think that I've got like one sitting down there. They're really fast. As soon as you hit that string, pow! You hear it. Instant note. Whereas with tubes, it just seems like it's slightly squishier.
Mm-hmm. And I think for me, there is this big difference in the note shape. So there is a thing that I have not been able to describe very well. it's hard when people do demos of them online. Like I could, I could put mics in front of a solid state amp, in cab, and then a tube amp. And it's hard to get the feeling because it's almost the way the air moves when you're sort of near the rig. Yeah. And I think that tube amps can still sound fast. Like the transient can be fast, but the note sort of blooms and has more of like a depth in its attack and decay than a solid state amp. Like I was just comparing, like I have a little Trickfish rig that Ryan sent out, which is so cool. I think you have one too.
Yes. One of the little ones.
The bullhead. Yeah. A little 112 and a bullhead. It's a 500 watt amp. Okay. So you set that next to the 50 watt, all tube Adam Clayton AC50 by Fender. Yes. Right. And what I notice is there's higher headroom. You can play cleaner and louder with the Trickfish rig, but there's something about at a low to medium volume, the sound of the notes through the all tube amp is just like more delicious. You're like, ooh, like it just sort of sounds better to me at like lower volumes. Yeah. And then you can plug into the solid state rig and turn it up and it's going to get louder. It's going to retain its composure. It's not going to distort very easily, right? Whereas the all tube amp, as you turn it up, it starts to sag. That thing of, like you describe of like the attack is sort of saggy. It maybe even starts to distort. Yeah, it starts to distort a little bit, Yeah, where a tube bass amp actually really shines is clean. Like clean and low to medium volume. Ooh, there's something about the way it projects the note. It feels just almost like it just sounds more quality or something like or more 3D or something.
It's 3D, that's it, isn't it?
Yeah. And it's hard 3D. Because it's hard to describe sound that way, but then you plug, you plug into the solid state thing and it's like, oh, it's sort of flat and sort of sterile sounding and not that sounds so demeaning, flat and sterile sounding. I mean, the thing that's amazing about a solid state amp is you can turn it up and it will compete with the drummer. And now and it sounds big and you turn it up and it retains composure. Whereas that, the Fender AC50 will get murdered by a drummer. It won't be able to cleanly keep up. It'll just start to turn into mush and saggy, distorted mush. Yeah. So it depends on what you want. How if we're just talking about sound, I love the sound of an all tube amp at low volumes, but I prefer a solid state or a hybrid amp, like a tube preamp maybe, and then a solid state or digital power amp if I'm playing something on a big stage, a high volume gig.
Because then you can actually cut through and it's not, because it's,
you're not struggling. I had for a long time, Fender made an amp, a Bassman 100. It was a 100 watt head. Yeah. Those sound so good, but there's just a point where you got it up to a certain level and now it's just over. It hits a ceiling. There's a threshold where it's not giving you any more volume or headroom. It's just sort of stuck.
Yeah.
And if you want to pop out over the mix, no. If you want to turn on the octave pedal, now it's just saggier. And like it can't do it. At a high volume. That's why I think an SVT, a 300 watt tube amp is, became so popular because they could do both. They could get loud. Because
they're super loud, but also they've got that delicious tubey thickness, but goddamn, they are heavy. Like how heavy? Are they 100 pounds or heavier?
No,
maybe,
but they're 80. I actually have one right back here on the floor.
They're 80 pounds.
Yeah. They're about 80. Between 80 and 90 pounds, I think. But it is a heavy 80 pounds. You sort of think, I can pick up my 80 pound dog or whatever. Like, you kind of have a reference of like, but man, you get that compact thing and you're like, and then you have to lift it on top of the 810. Oh my God.
Oh my God. Well, I had like George, my dog, when he was still alive, he was 20, I think. Okay. Like, just imagine like 4 Georges. That's heavy, dude. That's really heavy.
That's a lot of George, man.
It's a lot of George. Yeah. Yeah.
Can we speak to this weird difference? I would love to actually just address this thing around wattage, where people see like, oh, there's a 500 watt solid state amp and a 50 watt tube amp, but yet they're kind of like, seems like they're the same volume. Yeah. Do you know what that is? Oh, shoot. We froze. You froze. There we go.
I got you. You disappeared there for a while.
Yeah, I know. Yeah, you did too. Sorry. I was just asking about, can we speak to that wattage difference, that weird thing around, there's a 500 watt solid state amp and there's a 50 or 100 watt tube amp, but the tube amp is like, seems to be like louder in some instances, or what's that about? Do you know anything about that?
I have no idea, but I know it exists. Yeah, so I do. Basically, there's some sort of like technical jargon, and I'm sure somebody will know exactly why. Unfortunately, we don't. But what we do know is that the reality is that you can have like a 50 watt bass. Like tube watts are different to transistor watts. They're different. So you can't compare. They're just different, different volumes. So you can have like a 50 or like 100 watt all tube bass amp is going to be pretty beefy. Like you were saying, like what's the SVT? 300 watts, right?
300,
and it's like the loudest thing on the earth. Like nothing, not even a Tyrannosaurus Rex was as loud as a 300 watt all tube SVT. Whereas like transistor amps are generally like about 500 watts.
Yeah, or even up to 1,000, maybe even 800.
I think that this one of these trickfishes. I've got the big ball. It's 1,000 watts. Now, if you had 1,000 watt all tube amp, basically it's a weapon. It's
of mass destruction.
It's a weapon of mass destruction. So they are different, and it's complicated because what happens is when you're looking online and you're looking at a tube amp and you see that it's 100 watts, you're like, oh. What does that even mean? Does it mean I can gig with it? And honestly, I'm actually a little like out of the loop, underschooled in terms of what is a giggable wattage of all tube amp. Like, do you know?
Yeah, I do. I mean, I know for me, I've had a bunch of experience with this because I've had all the wattages. That AC50 that I just got from Fender, they sent over. It's only giggable in low volume situations. I would not take that on
is it a 50, is it 50 watt? Yeah.
It's 50 watts and it's a combo. It's a 115. So to me, it's sort of like Fender's attempt at doing a B15. And a B15, a lot of you may know is like the Ampeg flip top where, the head went into the cabinet. You could flip it around, put it on top. It's a studio staple. But I remember getting one of those. I have a B15 and it was, I don't know, 60 or maybe 65 watts or something. I think that's right. And thinking like, oh, this is cool. It's a kind of a big cabinet. I have one from the 70s. I'm like, I'm going to gig this. And I took it out. You play it at home and you're like, oh, this sounds so cool and warm. And you get it out and you turn it up and, you kind of turn it up to 3 and the drummer starts to play and you're like, oh, damn, I need to turn it up to 4 or 5. Past 5, it's just distortion. It's just flab. And not really pleasing distortion either, unless you're slamming with a pick or something.
Struggling. It's like,
it's farting.
Yeah. So what is the perfect wattage, or what's the bare minimum all tube wattage if you're going to gig with it?
Like, it depends on the gig. Let's say you're playing in an event band where you're playing with a drummer, medium to loud volume. You're playing drummer who's playing backbeat music in a club, rock band. I don't know, right? I think the minimum is 200. And there aren't a lot of 200 watt all tube amps out there, actually. I think there are a few. Sadowski made one for a minute that I have one of those, a SA200. That's a very giggable amp. Aguilar made one years ago that I think was 200 watts. It's kind of an odd request, but I think even maybe like Varellin there are companies out there divided by 13 that make these kind of like, they're more than 100, but they're not SVT level. 300 seems to sort of be where it's capped. I'm sure there are other things, other all tube amps out there that go above that are 400. I mean, there was the Mesa 400 plus. Do you remember those?
Oh yeah, dude.
The Mesa 400 plus.
I played through a bunch of those.
Those are cool. That's a vibe and a flavor.
Ashdown have got the CTM 300. I think that's obviously a 300 watt. I can't find any like 200 watt bass heads.
Yeah. And it's a weird market because it seems like if you've got anything that's 100 or lower, that's almost relegated to like you're doing a sit down gig.
Yeah.
It's like jazz brunch or studio. And that's really where what I think like, you know, a B15 or that new Fender amp, the AC50 really shines in the studio. Yeah. That said, I did just take it on a live gig, but it was a sit down. It was no drums.
Right.
It was singer-songwriter, right?
Different
and I was
vibe.
I was kind of playing like that baritone-y thing that I do on a hollow body bass. And it was awesome for that. I mean, it just sounded...
Was it really nice? Yeah.
Oh, I thought so. It was just big and plush and lovely, but it was quiet. Yeah. And that's cool. So yeah, I think if you want to dabble in that all tube deal, it needs to live in the 200 plus neck of the woods.
Yeah, dude. Blast from the past. Can you remember the Aguilar DB750?
Of course. God, that thing is a legend.
That is a monster amp, isn't it?
And that's a hybrid, right? That's like a hybrid tube preamp.
Wow.
Yep. It's a tube preamp and solid state power section, but their solid state power section is different. A lot of manufacturers will quote wattage based on a tone at 1K, like beep, like that sound. They'll say, "Ooh, we got that. We got 1,000 watts out of that."
Oh.
Yeah.
Interesting.
But
Aguilar
does things a little differently.
I'm on it now,
yeah. Or the 751 now, they make the DB751. I think they say what? It's 900 watts at 2 ohms or
975 watts at 2 ohms,
That means, and that's full bandwidth. So check this out, dude. It means that from 20 hertz to 20K full bandwidth sweep, it will do 900 watts or 975 versus, you know, the Bugara or, you know, almost anyone else actually that quotes wattage quotes it at a tone. We got we squeezed 1,000.
We got 1,000 watts.
Yeah. Versus a bass signal, something at, are you kidding me? 40 hertz, like the E string, 900 watts. Wow. So really, like they have been very truthful in their wattage. They could say 5,000 watts. I don't know if they could, but right, they could make that number bigger if they tested differently.
Yeah, like I love that. I haven't actually played the new one, the 751 DB750, but I have played the DB750, and it was a dream. It was amazing, awesome. Yeah,
I owned a 750, the original DB750 with the cool knobs.
Oh, really?
Yep. And I ended up selling it because I thought it was 42 pounds or something, and I remember thinking like, this is going to be half the weight of an SVT. It's going to give me more headroom live. It's going to be amazing. And for whatever reason, dude, it was the heaviest 42 pounds that I was like, is this more than the SVT? Like, I just remember being like, Jesus, am I just old and frail? I think that was probably the issue. But what I found, dude, that amp is endlessly powerful. And you can, and it's almost dangerously powerful. Like it will produce so much headroom and so much wattage that it can just blow up your speakers. Like it can take you out. It can take cabinets out.
It's massive.
It's massive. And then what I found too is that it was a little darker. Like in the top end, it has so much like bottom and stout mid range that it didn't sound as like airy, and I wanted it to sound, I kept wanting to like pop my ears When I was listening to it, I was like, I want there to just be more openness in the top, and it drove me away from it. But what I have heard from the crew at Aguilar is that the 751 addressed that, and it's far more open sounding in the top, still heavy.
That's interesting. I always remember like Willis, like Gary Willis used to have like a 750 and three 1x12s.
Oh, sure.
So,
yep.
Yeah. So he had it dry, like he had it at 2 ohms. Yeah. It was like, he had all the watts.
Yeah.
All the watts.
Oh, man.
So when you say
so
tubes,
cool.
then, like most people will go for it, like just for kind of like usability and ease of use and stuff like that. Most people will end up with probably something with a tube preamp rather than a fully tube amp, right? Like most people, unless they're going to get like an SVT, because not that many people have got like an SVT. You know, they're ginormous.
Yeah, and they're also really expensive to retube. And there's so many tubes in there, and the old ones have these weird tubes, 12DW7s, and oh my god! I mean, I have an old one from the 70s, and I toured it once, and it was problematic. There was a time where it, like it wouldn't. It was like it had this knock in it, and it was a tube, and I will say too that. The Sadowski SA200 that I have, I gigged that for a while.
Have you still got it?
I do have it. Yeah. Oh, Scott, it's a unicorn, man. It's a grail amp. I mean, and it's so cool. It sounds so good.
They are ginormous as well, aren't they?
Yeah.
And is it heavy as the sun or not?
It's not. It's. I would say it's probably high 30s.
Oh, so it's okay. So is it all tube or not?
Yeah. Oh,
wow. 200
and
watts.
You can put 200 watts.
Wow.
And I gigged that thing a bunch. But here's what happened. I was on a gig with that. This happened 2 times. I was on a gig. I was changing the tubes in it because you can put EL34s in it, 6L6s. You can put 6550s in it. You can change the power tubes, and it completely changes the way the amp responds. How fun! Well, it's a nerd's fucking dream, dude. And so I'm doing that right, and I've changed the tubes, and I've spent all this money on SED winged C's, Scott. Oh, a delicious 6L6 tube. And they were expensive, and they're in there and they look so good. And I'm playing My Girl on the wedding gig at some outdoors. Yeah. And I'm going, zoom, doom, doom, zoom, doom, doom. And I hear, and my bass goes, and I'm playing.
Nothing. Oh, nothing. God.
And I looked, and one of the tubes just burned out.
Yeah.
Well, that sucks. So now you take it in. Oh, the guy looks at it. Well, these might have been biased a little hot. Let's try to switch the tube platform and run them on these. And so we're back to EL34 as I go out on another gig. It's fine for a few weeks, but a month goes by and I'm out on that gig, dude. And I'm going, don't stop. Boo-doo-dee, boo-doo-dee-doo, doo-doo-dee-f. And what I realized is that no one gives a fuck about your esoteric, cool sounding tube amp.
Your EL34s. They're like, get them EL34s, lube them up, and push them up your ass.
Exactly. Take that huge hunk of that huge, beautiful silver rectangle and shove it all the way up your ass, dude. Because really, all anybody wants is for the fucking bass to work.
Yeah. And they are notoriously more sensitive than a regular non-tube bass amp. Especially the ones with all tube power amps, Why is it the all tube? The all tube power amps are definitely more sensitive than, like, let's say the just tube preamps.
Right, because they're generating the wattage, they get hot.
They're
those
bigger
tubes.
As well. They're just like bigger tubes, like freaking light bulbs, aren't they?
Yeah, and they get hot, and you can change them so that they bias, that they run a little hotter, so that the sound is and then they burn out easier. Dude, I I had the big Fender made one too, Scott. Do you remember the Super Bassman? I think they still make it.
Yeah.
It's 300 watts. It's their SVT.
Yeah, it's badass.
That did this diagnostic where it would like flash these lights in the back, and then it would come up green. All the lights would green, and hey,
ready to go.
Sometimes, dude, you'd fire it up in that diagnostic and everything would come back red. And you're like, oh, and then your bass is like, you're like, oh, and then you're like, oh, well, I'll turn it off and I'll turn it back on, and then they all come back green for a tune. And then a couple of those lights go orange.
Yeah,
I mean, dude, it's too much fucking drama.
If anybody can't tell, Ian has been on a real adventure over the years. Through the years, he has spoke about this to me before. But yeah, you went on a trip, didn't you, with the tube amps? Yeah. And just if anybody can't see his face, he looks weathered. He looks weathered. Like after this conversation about tube amps, specifically all tube amps, Ian's looking a little weathered. So maybe if you want to, go into the world of tube amps, ease yourself in tentatively. Yourself in tentatively. Maybe go with a tube preamp first.
There you go.
Like a regular bass head with a tube preamp. What are the options, Ian? Tube preamp. You've got the Noble.
Oh, okay. So are we just talking
what else
now?
We got?
Are you just talking about like a tube preamp DI that maybe lives on a pedal board?
No, actually, I was thinking about heads first, and I actually thought about your
hybrid head.
Yeah, I just thought about your beautiful Noble head.
Yes. Okay, so that's a hybrid, and it's
what
incredible.
Else is there? There's the Ampeg heads. Ampeg head, like they do. Yeah.
Ampeg, and I would say too, even the all solid state Ampeg stuff is sick. I played an AG700 recently that was amazing. That's all solid state. But if we're thinking about hybrid heads, okay, yes, the DB751 by Ampeg. If Jack will make you a Noble 1000 watt, that is the Noble preamp connected to a 1000 watt ICE power amp. It probably isn't. It's not 1000 watts full bandwidth, but it's a big, lovely sounding head.
Yeah.
Who else makes a hybrid, Scott? Who else is out there doing it? I'm sure Mark Bass does.
I think that Mark Bass do. I think that Gens Benz used to. Maybe Gensler now. I'm not sure. Yeah, I'd have to look into it. But yeah, like people can do their homework and find out. Maybe they can let us know.
And of course, there's Ampeg. Ampeg makes hybrids where you've got a tube pre.
Yeah.
I think here's something. Can I tell you this? The hybrid head thing is not as important to me as I thought it was going to be. I was like, oh, I'm going to get all that tube warmth out of the preamp. And
yeah.
I don't know. I've actually really loved having a tube situation on my pedal board, like just a tube DI, like the Noble, and then running actually into an all solid state head, like an AG700, for instance, by Aguilar. That's a really good one. I've run into the Mesa stuff, the Subway stuff. I've thought that has sounded nice.
So you just put them in front. You actually just put them in front of your amp, right? So just like a tube pedal or a tube preamp pedal, and you're just going straight into that, and then into the front of your amp. And so of those, which say those pedals again. So there's the Ampeg, is that right? In
terms of like a tube DI.
Yeah.
Out there? Okay, yeah. There's the Noble, which is my favorite like tube DI clean platform. It doesn't grind. It just sounds so good. It's not dirty. It's a clean tube preamp. The Ampeg, which I've never played, so I don't know, but I bet it's cool. I've heard people say good things about it. That has a tube in it as well.
Yeah.
But dude, there's also this new thing, right? Where there's some really good solid state stuff coming out. There's a company called Jad Freer in Italy.
Yeah.
The Capo, I don't know, it's CAPO DI. It has really nice FET gain stages in it, so it sounds tubey. If someone said, "Oh yeah, that's a tube DI," I'd say, "Of course it is." It sounds incredible. Also, like the Aguilar Tone Hammer, that's an awesome sounding DI and pedal.
Yeah.
And that's solid state with like a gain circuit inside of it. So I think that the tube thing has become more of like a talking point or like a marketing tool for a lot of companies than actually like, oh, it sounds superior. I don't know that a hybrid situation always sounds superior to a just a really excellently built solid state piece.
Well, Ampeg have just recently released this pedal called the SGT DI. I'll read you what it says right here, just so I'm not spreading any misinformation. It says the SGT DI preamp and DI pedal gives modern bassists an entire rig in a single stomp box. It delivers an enhanced super grit technology, trademarked, overdrive circuit, featuring iconic Ampeg SVT and B15 voices, versatile 3-band EQ, now with sweepable mid circuit. So it's got like plus introducing the first IR loader cab simulator so it's got a cab simulator in there as well.
Oh, so there's no tube in it. Am I right?
I don't think there is.
Oh, God, sorry. Then I've been spreading misinformation.
Have you? I don't think there is.
Yeah, they're smart if there isn't, because they're leaning on their IRs, they're leaning on their emulation stuff that they've done for plugins.
Yeah, I don't think there's a tube in it. I tell you what, there's a YouTube video of this guy A-Bing. Now, bear in mind that obviously... obviously it's not moving any air because it's through the computer. You listen to it through YouTube. He's A-B in this pedal, the SGT DI, with a B15. I could not tell the difference at all. Really? Nothing. Nothing.
Like a mic'd up B15?
Yeah, just going back and forward, I could not tell the difference. Wow. It was really surprising because I just thought there'd be some. There was nothing. I was like, wow. Yeah, it's pretty cool. It's
getting better. It's totally getting better. I mean, There is, though, I want to go back to the beginning. There is something about being in a room with a tube amp that is special. It's a special experience.
Yeah.
You know that trouser flap from the SVT that you love so much?
Dude, the best gigs I've ever done from a tone, like how pleased I've been with the tone and the trouser flap have all actually been SVTs. Yeah. And another one that stands out was a gig that I did with the Aguilar DB750.
Yeah, those are killing.
Yeah, but there was this one gig I can remember. The tone was it was the first time I gigged with an SVT. It was hired in. We were like in Dubai somewhere. I'd flown over to do this gig. And I was like, oh, SVT, cool. I've never played through one of these. I can just remember like playing with the band, and I was just like, what is going on? It was like something I'd never experienced before. It was amazing. Yeah. You could just like go up on the G string at any point in the G, and it just was just like super fat tones, and it was just incredible. Incredible.
There is something about, we talked about that tube wattage, and I can't talk the talk, but I do know that the reason why like a tube amp, all tube amp sounds louder, like the wattage is lower, but for some reason, God, this thing gets really loud, 300 watts SVT, but it's louder than my 1,000 watt, Trace Elliott or whatever.
Yeah.
The reason is because of compression. There's a compression that happens in the tubes that then when you go up high like that, there's something that happens where it's not accurately actually reproducing your G string. It's enhancing, it's compressing, and there's more bottom that comes through when you play up high. So like that is a really fun feeling when the whole range of your instrument feels bassy. You know?
Exactly that. You just go because you're so used to going from the E and you just get less and less. You end up with the G string and it's sort of like just kind of thin and weird. But on this thing, it just kind of like held that bass response throughout the entire thing. And it was, I noticed as well, like ghost notes just kind of sort of like jumped out it was like somebody punching me in the back, like little ghost notes with no effort.
Right.
It took zero. I just sort of like, it was incredible. It was like this weird compression. It was like this weird compression that was going on. God damn.
Oh man. And I mean, and it's the sealed, I've talked to you about this before, but it's also that sealed 810 is such a vibe. I mean, that is really incredible. Like a sealed 810 behind you. It's so tight and punchy. With the tube head feeding it. I have had also like two backline experiences that I think about all the time. One is with this really well-maintained, SVT from the 60s that like a backline company brought out. We were outdoor. I was with Eric Hutchinson, set up 810 and this guy's, prized SVT. And I played my jazz bass with flats and it was like the best bass tone I've ever had.
Was it amazing?
Oh, something about the amphitheater we were in and the guy that brought it was like, that's the best bass tone I've ever heard in my life. And I'm like, oh my God, like I can die happy,
Yeah.
And then also I did a gig where it was a DB 410, so the big Aguilar 410, just the one 410 and the 751, that new Aguilar 751, DB 751. And I was like, holy shit, this is like the punchiest, most effortless bass sound I've ever had. I mean,
so good. Yeah.
Where you just, you feel like you have so much horsepower at your fingers. You hear every single thing that you're doing. I really felt that with that Aguilar rig too. Yeah.
The cab really matters as well, doesn't it?
It's huge.
Can you remember when we were ABing that barefaced cab in the studio here in Leeds?
Dude.
It was the barefaced cab and it was that versus two 1x12s. And the barefaced cab literally shit all over everything. It was just so good.
Oh, man.
We were just
Shout out to Alex, dude.
Yeah.
Shout out to Alex from Barefaced. Sent over that Big Twin 3, I believe.
It's a Big Twin 3, yeah.
Yeah. Sort of built like a studio monitor, right? I mean, it's more like full range. It's designed to reproduce sound, across the spectrum really evenly, has ports along the side. It's really beautiful.
I'm looking now to see what it's called. Is it the Big Twin 2? It's a Big Twin 2.
Well, I don't even know if they're on the site yet, but I think it's the new version. I think it's the 3, or maybe he's still calling it the 2. But whatever, it's a redesign of his very popular Big Twin 2. So maybe he still kept it a 2.
Got it.
But,
okay.
Or maybe he's still working on it. But the cabinet that he sent you.
Oh, is it called the Super Twin?
Nope. It's the B.
No.
It's a B.
A B.
Yeah, Big Twin.
There's the Big Baby too. No, it's not that.
It's not the baby.
Maybe he's not good on the site. If anybody wants to check him out, just give Alex a shout at barefacedbass.com and say, what did you send to Scott and Ian? It is incredible.
It's incredible.
It's incredible.
It's 2 12s, I believe, and then like a horn and a mid-range.
Yeah.
I think it's 212. I think it has 4 speakers in it, right? The 212s, a mid-range speaker, and then a horn.
I don't know what's in it, man. It sounds outlandish.
It's crazy. They're so cool. And they he also makes sealed cabs. He makes a sealed 410, 610, and 810. And you know how I know the 810 is super dope?
Did he send you
Tim
one?
Comerford. No,
Oh,
I
has
wish.
he got
my
one?
God. Tim Comerford plays that with Rage.
Right, got it. Yeah. Oh yeah, the 8x10. Yeah, like the cab that you sent us that's closed back, and it sounds incredible.
But it's ported in the front. It has that big side vent along the front.
It's got a side vent. Yeah, it's still vented. Got it. Yeah.
Yeah, man. Oh, that is good stuff.
Oh man, I need to get that thing. I still not gigged it. I'm just such a. That's the issue, right? Well, yeah, like I just normally take my 212s, like 2 cabs, like 2 1x12 cabs, because they're just more doable, from a sort of like, maneuverability perspective. But yeah, they don't.
Oh, you got to gig it. Yeah. And you know what, dude? I just went and looked, and I just have been spreading misinformation this whole time. It is called the Big Twin 2, but it's Generation 3.
So it is the Big Twin 2
Generation 3, and it does not have a mid-range driver. It has 2 12s and a horn and a big side port handle on the back that you can roll. Alex, if you listen to this, I'm so sorry that I misrepresented your cab earlier. It is incredible. It's an incredible cabinet. I need to get one.
It is, yeah. It basically says, blah, 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 the punch of a Super 12, the efficiency and loudness of the Super 15, the bottom dispersion and clarity of the Big Twin T, plays loud with small amps, plays stupid loud with big amps, lighter and more efficient than the best 4x10 cabs, and more bottom, much better dispersion and maximum output of an 810 stack. It is, It sounds massive.
And you know what's cool too about those the bareface stuff is the dispersion. So like, you know that thing of when you're playing in front of your amp at a gig and, you know, the keyboard player off, you know, stage right is like, I can't really hear the bass. And you're like, damn, it's really loud where I am. Or the drummer is like, could you angle your cab so I could hear it a little better? The idea with the dispersion is that even if you're side stage, you're going to hear it. It's not as super just pointed directional.
Got it.
As a standard rig. So the whole stage, dude, the whole stage feels the bass.
Exactly. Dude, I've just been on his website here and it says the Big Twin 2 is now being replaced by the Big Twin 3.
Hey, see, there we go.
If you order a BT2, your order will be automatically upgraded to the BT3. For more details about why the BT3 is even better, click this link. And then if I click the link, it takes me to a page, this is freaking cool, that says top secret on it. I love it. I love it.
That's so funny.
Yeah,
top
they
secret.
are really great. Top secret.
You have that. You have the 3, I believe. Or, you know, I feel like you have the most recent one. So
whatever I've got, it's badass. I need to get out and I need to do some gigs on it. I can't fit my damn car. Stupid small car.
Yours also has, I think yours has the like black grill cloth. Am I right?
It does,
Yeah, it looks sort of like an Ampeg. It's so cool. Anyway.
It's badass, yeah. And then in terms of mine, I'm just like running a Trickfish as well. Head at the minute, 1K. 1K, that's really nice. But yeah, Ryan sent me through the other one, yeah. Oh, amps, dude. I could talk about this stuff all day. I know. I do want to apologize to anybody that sort of like wanted to come to some kind of like conclusion at the end of this conversation. But what do I buy?
Yeah.
Well, we don't know because we're just trying out this stuff as well. Like if I don't know. Like I don't think I would regularly gig an all tube head. I think that as far as I go was, you know, tube preamp. But just like you were saying, I'd probably just put, and in fact, I've been putting in front of it, let me just grab it.
Grab it, dude.
Yeah.
Grab it.
And it's not a tube. I don't think it is anyway. It's one of these.
Origin. Oh yeah, we wanted to talk about bass rigs.
The Origin bass rig, yeah.
Those are incredible.
They're amazing, yeah. So you can get like a nice tubey sound using this pedal.
And to me, the Origin effects out of the UK makes the best compressors in the game. Cali 76s, I love them. And they make this range of bass amp simulator pedals. So they make one that's based on a vintage SVT. That's the one that Scotch has held up there. It's called the SV Super Vintage. And then they make a black one. Oh yeah, you've got them both. And then they make what they call the 64 black panel or the 64 panel maybe. And that's based on like a Showman old
Have
Fender.
You got them both?
Yeah, I have them both.
Which one did you prefer?
I like the Ampeg one. I wish I could say that I like the Fender one better because I feel like it's the
I did like the Fender one better.
Do you like the Fender one better?
I like the Fender one better, but it's different for different things. Like I haven't actually been with the stuff that I'm getting together for recording the album and stuff like that. Honestly, I've not even cared. I've not even been. All I've been worried about is just like, can I play the freaking tunes? Yeah, I'm just sort of somebody like anybody's like, well, what kind of amp you gonna play? I'm like, I don't care about what amp. I'm just gonna try and stuff
plug into.
Yeah, exactly. Actually, when we record it, we're going to record with all cans in the. In the like no amps in the control room at all. So we're all going to be in the control room, no amps at all. I'm worried about it. I'm like. Just because I'm just, like no amps in the room. Oh, it's going to be all cans. Is it going to, like, how's that going to sound? I need to talk to you about this actually and see what you recommend because I don't want it to sound shit. Like the stuff that I did with like Josh Smith and Gary Novak and stuff like that. Like I had a B15 in the room.
Yeah.
But honestly, like it was really quiet, and Gary Novak was absolutely cracking the crap out of that kit. So I just had my cans on, and it was fine. Mm-hmm. I don't know, maybe a conversation for another podcast. But yeah, I am like a little concerned.
Get some good isolating headphones. I think these that I wear, I've used in the studio. These are Sennheiser HD 280s, and they really go on and like and kind of suck down. You probably don't have time to get like molded in-ears, and that's I haven't got
time.
Yeah,
I've got some great in-ears though that just sort of like I've got some Shure whatever they are 800. I think you could try them.
Yeah. Also, I will say, man, Westone makes a set of in-ears that the UMX3s or something. I think like they're just 3 drivers. Man, I love them. They sound fantastic.
Oh, really? Yeah.
Yeah, and they isolate really well. I can send you along a couple of links.
I tell you what, I think I need to just do some shedding with them on. That's what I'm concerned about. I'm concerned about turning up and
having like it be stressful,
just sounding different. I'm just sort of like, because like it's one thing sitting here practicing to tracks, and and I've got my rig over there, and it's all kind of separate. Well, what's it all going to feel like when it's pushed into my head? And I've got in-ears on, and I'm playing a fretless. Am I going to be like, God. Is it going to feel a little bit more? Am I going to be more concerned about intonation and all of that shit? So I need to do a little bit of shedding with the cans on, just to make sure I'm comfortable with it.
My biggest tip to you in that environment is isolation is important. So I think just putting on the old Sony studio cans that don't isolate, what happens then is you turn things up really loud and it just starts to get mushy. I think the best thing you can do is isolate yourself from the room in terms of you're not hearing the drums. You're not hearing Gergo just smack the crap out of
Gergo
the drums in the room. So whether that's a nice isolating set of cans or it's some in-ears that you feel like you put them in and you get that room noise reduced. I think that'll really be helpful. But dude, it's and I get it. You're like, you're not really thinking about pedals. You're just like, I gotta play these lines, man.
It's so funny, man. Like I've got like all of the pedals sat down here, all of them. I've got like I've got a envelope filter. I've got a fuzzer store. I've got the OC2. I've got the Pog Micro. I've got the Wah-Wah. I've got the free. I've got like all of the pedals. And I was like just shedding the tunes the other day, and I was like, I need to get rid of all of this out of my life. Yeah. I need to be focused on these. I've got a delay pedal now. I've got like a delay pedal for when I play up high on like do the solo stuff. Yeah. That's it. I think that is the only pedal I'm going to take is one pedal.
I love that.
Yeah.
I love that.
Like maybe one of these, I don't know. Maybe one of the,
whatever. I bet you'll get a really nice DI sound that you'll really like. Yeah, bring one of those in. I don't know. I think, can I give you my hot take on the different categories for different players?
Yes, absolutely.
Okay, here's my hot take. If you play in church, if you play in like modern, I get a lot of people that ask me about like worship context. What do I need for that? You don't even need an amp. Spend some money on a nice set of in-ears so that you hear yourself well, you like the sound of your bass through it, and then get a pedal board, a small board that you feel consistent about. So I don't even care what you put on it, but maybe you get a DI that you like and you just always roll with that DI. I recommend the Noble for something clean, the Jadfir Capo if you want some dirtier options. Now, if you lean amp, you're like, oh, but I want it to sound like an amp. That's when all this emulation stuff comes into play. The HX Stomp, for instance, by Line 6, the Origin bass rigs that Scott was showing, that new Ampeg, DI that has the super grit technology. I can't speak to that because I've never played it. But, and also we're not being paid. You guys, by the way, we're doing this out of the goodness of our hearts.
Yeah, we do get paid by these guys. Yeah.
Nobody, like, Ampeg has not contacted Scott and been like, please read the specs off the website. You read those specs off the website. I'm like, damn, man, Ampeg is happy.
Send me a freaking preamp, Ampeg.
Hey, I'm sure they would.
Send me a preamp.
And then in terms of, that all applies in recording too. If you want a clean DI sound or a dirty DI sound or an ampy DI sound, all those things I mentioned works in the studio as well. Like in-ear gigs, like church stuff, pop gigs, or in the studio. But if you're playing live and you want an amp that is going to slay behind you, you're playing in a cover band, you're playing in a rock band, I would get something either all solid state or hybrid, with a cabinet that's big enough to do the thing that you want to do, something that's reliable. I mentioned the Aguilar stuff. That's the first stuff that comes to my mind. I really like that gear. Even the all solid state stuff, the AG700 is killing. And then if you play lower volume gigs, or you have, like, how about this? You play lower volume gigs, or you play in a studio where you want to mic up an amp, then get a cool tube amp, get a B15, get that Adam Clayton AC50, where, you know, you're excited about hearing that thing in the room, or it's a low, you know, you've got a residency at the jazz brunch. Oh God, get that Adam Clayton amp, bring in your B15. Just sounds awesome. But just know that one of those tubes might flame out, and then there's no bass.
I'm looking on the have you tried the Trickfish preamp as well? You reminded me, because you mentioned the tone.
You know, I haven't, but I sure would.
Is it kind of like the Tone Hammer? Is that the kind of vibe?
Probably very similar to that. Very similar, where it's got EQ options, maybe a bit of grit option. That's another one to check. I mean, there's so many out there. And then let me just say this: if you're a player where you've got crew, you've got maintenance options, you have a facility to bring a backup, go for it. Bring that big old SVT. I got to do a tour when I was out with Eric Hutchinson. We opened up for Kelly Clarkson. I brought my SVT. It was fucking awesome. It was beautiful too. I've got a white SVT rig. It was so fun.
Did you wear white pants?
I did not. If you didn't,
man, you should have leaned into it, like white pants, white SVT.
Nobody wants to see me in white pants. Oh God.
Like full BGs, white flares, and a white SVT.
And a white SVT. Oh, look at that douchebag up there in white flares and his white SVT. He thinks he's so fancy.
No, dude, they'll be like, look at that guy up there with his white SVT and his white flares. Look how happy he looks.
All right. I would be pretty happy, actually. It'd be pretty great. I will say though, that amp went down, like it broke. I had to use the opener's rig for a couple of nights. Also, it was really heavy. I remember when some of the crew from the Kelly crew had to move it, they were pissed because it was so big and heavy. He's like, what's the opener doing with this? Yeah. You know, so it's just know that you bring out that big old tube rig to what you're doing, and it has a cost.
It has a social impact.
It has a social impact, yes. And I don't know that I'll ever do it again, actually. I don't think I'll ever regularly gig a full-on tube amp in a
moment in time.
I'm like, nah, I want something that works. For me, the reliability is more important. It's more important for my sanity and for the bands that I play in, what they're looking for. No one gives a shit about the difference between the 3D sound of an SVT or something more reliable like an AG700 by Aguilar. And in some cases you may prefer that. You think you might want that tube amp, then you hear that big old full range Aguilar thing with all that headroom, and you might be like, whoa. Wow, actually, I didn't think I liked solid state, and now I do. I've had that experience. So
interesting. Ian, thank you so much for sharing your tube woes with us. It's been a trip. It's been a great one. Thanks for listening, guys. And and hey, and if you're not following us over on YouTube yet, we've got the podcast over there as well. So if you just search Scott Space Lessons Podcast, subscribe to the channel, and we'll see you next time. Take it easy.
Get it going. Yeah. Take care, everybody.
See you in a bit. Bye.